Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Practice Forward podcast. I'm your host, Owen Bush. Today we are joined by Jeff Akerman from Rise Architecture. Hey, Jeff.
Hey, Owen. How's it going?
It's going great. It's good to have you here today. So a little bit about Jeff. Jeff Akerman is the founding principal of Rise Architecture, a multidisciplinary firm operating at the nexus of regulatory experience, technological adoption, and urban redevelopment. With roots in Brooklyn and projects now spanning multiple states, Jeff's practice is driven by a clear ethos. Design must serve both vision and constraint. Under his leadership, Rise has embraced emerging tools like XR for collaborative reviews, while also navigating the high-stakes terrain of zoning reforms and building codes. This episode explores how Jeff balances innovation with feasibility, scales with precision, and reframes architecture as both a creative and civic act. So, and then once again, the Practice Forward podcast is sponsored by Scan-to-Plan. Scan-to-Plan is redefining how architects engage with existing conditions. Their reality capture workflows convert complex spaces into precise model-ready deliverables, bridging the gap between field truth and digital intent. Whether capturing heritage sites, urban cores, or interior retrofits, Scan-to-Plan's data-first approach enables teams to model, plan, and design with clarity. At the intersection of LiDAR and BIM readiness, we don't just scan, we decode the built world for what it is and what it could become. Okay, very good. Nice to see you, Jeff.
Yeah, I think that intro gives me way too much credit.
Well, Jeff, I mean, you are doing some really astonishingly a whole lot of projects, and really just an enormous amount of buildings coming out of your firm. So it was a little amazing to me to see you at such a young age, having developed quite an empire for yourself there. So
I have a little bit of a secret though about it. I have this cloning machine in my basement. There's really 5 of me running around. That's how I do it.
You have a what?
A cloning machine in my basement. I got 5 of me running around.
See. Oh, okay,
That's
right.
how it works,
Excellent. So how many of you are you got in there right now?
I got
which
5
one am
of
I
me.
talking to?
I got 5 of me. I mean, you're talking to number 3. I've got 5 of me running around. I'm working on getting a couple more of them running around. Yes.
Oh man, that's the secret to your success. I gotta talk to you. Talk to you offline about that.
Exactly.
Well, actually, when we met, first time we met, and I said, Jeff, I don't know how you do all this incredible work, and you told me, I just stay out of the way and I let God do the work. Essentially, is what you told me, right?
So that's the theological backing to allow me not to be stressed out. Like, one of the things I always discuss with people is stress, and stress is a mental reaction to your surroundings that create aspects to give you a very hard time to focus, because it creates pressure. And one of the things that allows me to deal with the stress that I deal with on a daily basis is to remind myself that I'm really not in charge. The more I remind myself that I'm not in charge, that gives me the ability to deal with stress. But the actual growth of the company, I heard this from, I forget who actually told me. I think it's Unblinded. They made a comment about, in order to grow a company, you have to be able to duplicate. And the mental duplicate is to duplicate what you can do within other people within the company, that it gives you the ability for them to do components of what you do, and therefore allow you to run those departments within the company. Right. And I think that's very, very much important in our success, is being able to create teams within our teams that understand our vision, understand what we're trying to accomplish, and find a way to implement it the way we would have implemented if we were implementing them ourselves. And one of the ways I can prove it, but you see that, is that we have staff members that are working with us for almost, some members are with us since the beginning of opening the company, as well as people that we have. Like, I met one of our employees out there. She told me, I've been here for 13 years. I was like, what? But that's really what it's been. Most of our staff has been us at the beginning. We try to keep our staff for a long time, and we try to mold them into what we see as what we're trying to accomplish through our company and what we're trying to put into the world.
Yep. So Rise began as a basement vision, apparently. So tell me about how you rose out of the basement. What stayed consistent and what's been redefined as you scaled across regions and project types?
So we opened up in the basement. A very strict mantra when we opened up the company is to have design be the implementation of function and usability at the same time. One of the things that in architecture, you're very, if you hear this phrase, you say, does form follow function? Does function follow form? And our vision is that there's no such thing. You can't have, I always say, I can sleep in a round room or a square room. So how can you tell me that a function, in essence, generates shape and space? And the answer I always give to this is that they both need to work in unison so perfectly to make a perfect project. You never see a good project that looks bad and doesn't work. Both of them have to happen at the same time. They got to work and they got to look really nice at the same time. So someone's living in them, they need to feel comfortable in them. They need to use it as an intended use, but at the same time, they need to want to be there, which means it's got to feel nice as well. That's the mantra we opened up the company in the basement with. And I believe that's the mantra we still hold to today. Whether we're doing large projects or we're in the process of designing a mini city in Florida, even that concept is still tantamount that we're trying to accomplish within our projects. I think that's really what we bring forward and always try to bring forward within our projects. And that's been what we've been held true the whole time through.
Sure, sure. Well, so I imagine there's a friction you deal with a lot. So what does client-driven design actually look like when your vision and regulations collide with each other?
So I'm not sure I understand the question fully. If you don't mind elaborating on it a little bit.
Well, I'm just saying, you're focused on client-driven design, and yet you're also, managing all kinds of regulatory environments all the time, and you have certain, quite visionary designs that you're developing. So, what happens when those things sort of smash up against each other, and how do you navigate that? The client, the regulations, the vision.
So I would say they never really collide. And
Mm-hmm.
I sound like a little bit esoterical to undo the question, but the definition of collision means that people don't want it to actually happen. I find that when you educate your clients and explain to them how the regulations is affecting what they're asking for, they in turn want the building to work. I'll give you an example. We had a client that called us the other day, and he sent me a zoning analysis from another architect showing a 9-story building. And I was like, wow, it's beautiful, but you're not building that. In fact, I'm not designing it because you're going to lose your money if you design it. So he looks at me and goes, like, why? I said, well, yeah, if you do a 9-story building on a 25-foot lot within New York City, that means that I've got 2 staircases. I got an elevator. I'm losing between 30 and 35% of every floor plate. Building's not making money, right? He's like, well, here's an exact example. Regulation is impeding on the fact they want to build 9 stories, but the 9 stories is the regulation is generating the code requirement for that as well. So we have to juggle all those aspects at the same time to accommodate the clientele. But the goal is that the client really wants to build a building and make money on that particular building. So therefore, his real goal is not in conflict. His real goal has to be molded to fit the mold that's necessary to get him what he needs to get out of the picture. And that's what it really comes down to, is getting them understanding that their vision actually lines up with what they're trying to accomplish, and understand what the restrictions are so they actually go down that goal to actually have what they're trying to accomplish.
Yes. Yeah, no, I always find that just, having patience and being able to articulate things to all the different stakeholders, often, a lot of those conflicts that you assume are there are not actually there. It's just people don't really understand how things work, right? So
we take the time, we educate our clients and get them so knowledgeable. I told my clients, I said, I love a client that knows more than me, because then at least I can have a conversation. They can teach me something, So the more they know, the more we can help them understand it, the better that I find the projects move smoothly, because everybody knows where they're trying to get to and get to accomplish that aspect of it.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, I have to do a whole lot of education in what I do because, people, they don't know necessarily what a scan is, or what a documentation is, or what tolerances are, or what all these underlying technologies are. And so, there's a lot of times people are comparing apples and oranges. They don't even realize it. And
how do you explain water to clients?
What's that?
How do you explain LiDAR to clients?
That's a good question. Well, what I say is that there's a whole number of different underlying technologies. So people talk about scans, but there's a lot of different ways to derive a scan, right? So some people are using photogrammetry. Some people are using things called time of flight sensors, which they call LiDAR, but it's not really LiDAR. It's it's a sensor that might be in your iPad or your iPhone, where you move the device around and it's sending a directional beam out of there and it's capturing data, but that device has no fixed origin point. And so because of that, it can tend to drift all over the place. So you're getting data, but you don't know you have no way of knowing if that data is accurate or not. There's also, photogrammetry, which is, creating data from photography. There's a lot of different underlying technologies. What we do with our company is we use, very engineering grade, high-end LiDAR scanners that we know that no matter how large the building is, even a 3 million square foot building, that we can derive tolerances that are between 0 to 1/8 of an inch from any point to any other point in the point cloud. That's because we're using, professional grade equipment. The scanners we use are, about $60,000 each. So they all, when they capture about 1 million points. And then those, every time we capture again, they overlap by 20 to 30%. So there's always going to be, an extra 200,000, 300,000 points that are there only to validate and verify the location of all the other points in the point cloud. So, that's how we go about doing it. People have tried all kinds of sort of prosumer tools and things to do existing conditions, and they tend to pay for it in the long run when they're dealing with endless hours of meetings for coordination and things when no one's on the right page. They tend to find out when it's too late, when they're already in construction, and then these can turn into $100,000, $50,000 problems.
Yeah. I'm very much aware of those issues.
Yeah. And so you guys have your own. I asked you guys have your own LiDAR team with Rise. Is that right?
We purchased a scanner. What we realized that a lot of times, and we've never used scan-to-BIM, so we kind of have that conversation. But one of the things that we realized, and we get a lot of these scans back from a lot of the smaller firms giving us these point clouds or the measurements recreated into Revit, we find to build off of that components are very, very non-functional, right? The missing vents. If I'm missing a vent, I have no clue where my verticals are, my horizontals are. I'm missing light switches. I'm missing energy boxes, switch boxes. I'm missing components that are so important for the architect to know where those are. And we're going to go in and design those buildings. We were missing that information. We like having all that information. So we've gone, and at that point, realized that we decided to purchase our own product and measure for ourselves, our own buildings. And we do that purely in-house for our projects on hires. So we like to see, so we like also having our architects touching and feeling the building prior to actually start working on the project, really to know what they're dealing with. You talk about structure. One of the issues I deal with on retrofits and additions to buildings is we don't like doing additions to buildings that much because I want to know what's behind the hood. I want to make holes in your building. I want to see what the structure is. I want to see what's holding up the structure, where it is. We're using steel. How's my steel running? Can I run ductwork above the steel, below the steel? Am I going to lose height? These things are legitimate questions, and they're very hard to know unless I pop holes sometimes in existing buildings.
Yeah, so, well, I mean, listen, I can see why you did that, because most of the partners I deal with have had very similar experiences with scan-to-BIM companies where, the company is kind of, they came out of, two guys who bought a scanner and they love scanning, but they don't necessarily know that much about BIM or Revit or CAD or really what the priorities of architects. I mean, frankly, one of the reasons I'm doing this podcast is to learn more about that myself. But we really wanted to be model based. We really wanted to start with the BIM and really start with the priorities of architects, making sure to cover all those little details that you're talking about. We have a dedicated modeling team that's done every single project with us. And we also have a separate team that does quality control that does every project with us. to make sure that all those details are included. I think with a lot of these scan-to-BIM companies, they may just outsource it. They may have, you know, multiple modeling teams that they outsource things to. And so you never really know what you're going to get. You never really have that consistency. And you don't necessarily have a partner who, you know, is speaking the same language as you are in terms of Revit, BIM, modeling, level of detail, etc.
100%. I can't tell you the horror stories that we've dealt with, so I can tell you 100% it's an accurate take on it.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, you know, getting a good point cloud is always good, and I'm sure, you know, that's useful for you, but how that translates into a model is, you know, it's there's a very wide variety. I mean, our company has incredibly well-defined standards where we go through every single component that's in the BIM and outline, you know, how detailed the modeling families are. What I've found with most of our competitors is that they basically say, oh, we're going to give you a moderate level of detail, and they don't even elaborate beyond that. So
it's not enough information for us. I can tell you that right now. An architect's perspective is these basic, I think what they term it LOD 100, LOD 200. So LOD 100 and 200 are basically for our intents and purposes are worthless. We cannot use those things. LOD 300 and up is where things start becoming usable from an architect's perspective, really, where we can start getting all the information in there, having the details, I'm getting all the bumps in the walls. I can start at least extrapolating from there how the building's built as best as we possibly can. It's not perfect. The best would be to open up walls and all those other things. But LOD 300 and up really starts getting us what we really need as an architect's perspective.
Sure. But, you know, a lot of times they're going to tell you it's LOD 300 and it's really LOD 200. It's like it's all generic modeling families. Everything is generic. You know, they might do a couple things that kind of make it feel like it might potentially pass as LOD 300, but really you're looking at a whole bunch of generic modeling families, generic windows, generic doors, and there's only so much that's going to do for you.
Correct.
So I can absolutely see why, you know, you took that into your own hands. So now you're also using, it looks like you're also, like, in your workflow, you're also using some XR tools like HoloLens and Archio, which I don't even know what Archio is, but.
So we've used Archio. Archio is actually a very cool product. They're still building out the thing. So basically, it's actually a collaborative tool where we can all get on a VR program together, meaning we have multiple people on a VR video together and actually point out hits that we're getting within our BIM models. So we actually can literally load ourselves into the building and walk the building virtually. And therefore,
so it's kind of it's almost like a multiplayer video game environment where people are inside.
Like so imagine we build our model in Revit, and then you load it into Archio, and everybody can collaboratively go in there and walk around the model and have a conversation about elements. Now,
that's
Archio's
incredible. Do you see them as avatars? Do they show up as like video game characters, or?
They're not as glorified as that. I would say the technology is getting better, but it's there are avatars, small avatars. You do get to pick them out. We use it for hits. Like if we're having an issue on a design, we can't figure it out because it just doesn't add up because it's a complicated issue with multiple different valleys and other things hitting at the same point. We can load ourselves in and actually go see it and like, oh wow, okay, this is an easy solution. Let's just fix it this way, right? So imagine you load yourself in the video game and your building's there and you get to walk it. With the finishes, it's pretty cool.
Wow. So you're meeting with your clients and you're wearing a VR headset and you meet them inside the building?
We don't use it for that yet. We used it in one case like that is where we had a building that was doing build outs and we were having a conversation because they had a hard time renting the building and they were debating they should actually build out a couple of model offices to show people what it may look like. And we said, you know what, instead of doing that, we'll build out a VR office and you can have them walk it in the building. So you had headsets in the building and people walked offices in the building and you leased out office space that way without actually building out the office spaces. So it does work a little bit like that.
But typically when you guys meet, it's more like on a desktop. So you're looking around you're looking at a flat screen and you're navigating around the space like that. More like you're meeting them in basically just kind of like as if you were meeting them in some kind of multiplayer gaming
Right. It's a little
environment, right?
confusing. Right.
Yeah.
It's a little confusing to use it. So to get a regular user to use it, it's a little bit more complex because it's not like a regular gaming. So it doesn't have a gaming background to go sit there and
Yeah.
how to maneuver around it is difficult. We actually have in
Uh-huh.
our office, we have because we're a little old school, a little bit also at the same time. We have a tabletop whiteboard. The entire conference room is a white top tabletop where we can write, sketch on the table in front of our clients while they're sitting at the table. We wanted to have it more multimedia where it's kind of a digital version. We had a very hard time.
Yeah.
Flat screens laying flat always tend to get the damage and they don't really work. But as a whiteboard, we can do it. It's pretty cool.
Wow, that's great. And then so like when you're let's say if you're in a gaming environment, which obviously is going to be entirely digital and quite different from the final construction, how it's actually going to look when it's finished. How do you differentiate with your clients and kind of get it so that they're not seizing on and being too literal about things that they're seeing that are really meant to be kind of at a more schematic level or a more like kind of symbolic representational level?
That's a great question. And I find that even we have the same issue in renderings. I find this a lot where we'll do a rendering of a picture and the client's like, I'm not getting that. How come when we finish the drawings it's not there? Well, instead it was a very concept rendering. We started doing what we call sketchy renderings or sketchy models. So where we dumb down, even where we may be further along, we'll dumb down the item that we're handing out because when the client sees a sketchy rendering, they don't impose the information saying, oh, this is the final product. They actually look and go, oh, wait, we're not really finalized. We can do some changes. But if you give them a final rendering with a high-end image, most clients interpret that to be the final product, even though it's purely a computer-generated item. So we've dumbed it down a little bit on purpose to keep people in the mindset of it's sketchy and still not finalized.
Right.
And that allows us to have that conversations and say, you know what, let's change this, let's have this conversation. And a lot of our clients are developers, they're already far into those games already, they already know what they're doing. The newer developers require a little bit more massaging when it comes to these items.
Yeah, it's always it could be dangerous. It could really be a slippery slope if you're showing people things that look a little too realistic, you know. It's a tricky thing because renderings can kind of help everybody be on the same page, but it can also create all kinds of expectations that are right.
I give you a real-time example. We designed a arc for a synagogue on a project, and the cost of the arc ended up being more expensive. So the building owners decided to go with a much cheaper product. They got someone to donate the arc and pay for the whole thing. He donated it based off the renderings. When they built it, because they cut the cost drastically, it looked nothing like the original renderings. Not because they couldn't build the original rendering, they just decided to save some money. The person who donated insisted that he's not donating it anymore because he says, I donated that arc, not the arc you built, and therefore I am not paying for it.
Right. So
there's a real-time story where you have to be cautious on what you show people because you could have that ramification of where people think they're getting something and ultimately not get it. If they specifically are looking at elements that are finalized and they take that interpretation to be real, and then you go and change it, you can have a very big problem. I see it all the time.
I see it all the time where people have these incredible, beautiful, glossy renderings that look so mind-blowing, and then when the building is actually completed, it just looks totally generic and dumbed down and utilitarian.
My partner and I have this ongoing LinkedIn feed between the two of us. Whenever we see a rendering that we know will never look like that when they finish the building because it's impossible, we have an internal conversation and we kind of get a kick out of it, you know? It's like someone posted a magnificent building online, and I shouldn't have done this, but I did this publicly a little bit. I asked him, like, just curiosity, where are the gutters going, you know? They look really pretty until you start putting gutters up. Like, wait a second, the whole building changes, you know? And like, why are you messing with my posts and stuff? I'm like, okay, sorry, I didn't mess with you, you know. But you know, you're right. It's just not accurate. Why are you lying to the public? It's just not true, you know. So when we try to put renderings out, our final renderings, we usually try to push. We don't usually put renderings, at least our final version of renderings. We actually only give sketchy renderings up front. Only once we finalize the constructability of what we're actually proposing, that's actually buildable exactly the way we show it.
Right. And so now you're also using HoloLens, which is a XR tool made by Microsoft. And that's so what that is it's basically what they call mixed reality, where you're wearing a headset in the field, which is transparent. So you can actually see out the world around you, but you also see a overlay, like a heads up display where it's showing you kind of a transparent field in front of the world that you're looking at. And that field can contain, I would imagine, all kinds of construction information, modeling, so they can sort of see the future building in front of the existing building at the same time on site. Is that correct?
It's correct. That was the example we gave you before when we were talking about the person's leased out office space. We used that mixed reality where they walked the actual building, and in the building itself, you actually saw walls, furniture, before anything was actually inside the building. So they walked spaces that looked like they were built out, and they weren't built out yet. We've actually used it on groundbreaking ceremonies where they would walk in and see the building on the site when they're just literally doing a groundbreaking. So people go, oh, wow, this is what I'm donating to, or this is what I'm going to build. And like, wow, this is really cool. We can actually tell what our building's going to look like on site. And it's a really great tool for we use it more from a marketing perspective, but it's a great tool to really see planning on site and how you interact with things and how it's going to feel when you're finished. And you get to walk the site, actually physically can walk it with building standing prior to anything being there. It's fantastic.
Sure. I'm sure it would inspire a lot of confidence with your stakeholders to be able to put that thing on and actually, I mean, you know, whether it's real or not, I think it's definitely impressive. So how do you do that? You load the Revit model into HoloLens somehow?
So we actually use Archio, which is part of the technology before. Archio allows us to load the model into real-time location and therefore allow us to do a mixed reality on the Archio product. So I can actually load it in the Archio form into mixed reality, and I can fix the model into place so you can't play with it either. So if I fix the model and you walk it, because typically Archio is an interactive project, so then I can fix the model, therefore it's not interactive, and at the same time it's site-based. So you can walk it, not touch it, but when you walk, it gives you a GPS locator within the model itself, so it knows where you're going.
Interesting.
Really
Wow.
cool walk always. It's pretty cool. Yeah, you have to play with it to feel it. It's like, sounds too futuristic. It sounds like almost we're living in Star Trek or something, you know?
Yeah, yeah. So, okay, so Rise is really active across like a whole number of different states. And you said you're licensed in what, how many states?
18 states.
18 states, quite a bit. And you're working in how many states
18
now?
States.
You're actually working in 18 states. It's incredible. So anyway, it seems as if, you know, you're developing in all different types of communities, all different kinds of regions. You know, how do you maintain any kind of regional character from getting lost in replication with all your work?
So we are very big proponents of not matching what we have. And then what I mean by that is a lot of architects, when you walk one of their buildings, you walk every single one of the buildings all look the same. And to us, our product is not about what we want. It's about what our client needs and wants. And to get that is irrelevant of where I am and what I'm doing. For instance, we design from, you say genres, we've designed from chocolate factories, apartment renovations, to massive factories, to storehouses. We've done it all, from synagogues to schools, massive schools. We've done site work. We've done city building. And the way to be able to do all the different mantras is be able to really put yourself and immerse yourself into the use that you're trying to design and imagine what is necessary to accomplish that. So like, for instance, a chocolate factory, we had to figure out how their operation works. We designed a commissary kitchen for a bakery that has 5 different locations. They moved it all into one location. They initially said they needed 12,000 square feet. We sat down, we broke apart their operations. We got them into 7,000 square feet, and they work perfectly. They're still working out of the place and growing.
Yeah.
So the more we understand their operations and what they're trying to accomplish, we put ourselves, immerse ourselves into that aspect, and therefore ultimately get from there what we're trying to accomplish. So you have, even within this, and the reason why we push this is, so it says, I designed a school, I designed all schools. And the answer is, that's not really the case. I have one administrator operates one way, and another administrator operates an entirely different way. I'll give you an example of administrator. We had one administrator that told us he wants his office right outside of the classroom, so when the kids get punished, they're scared of him. So the second they walk into the classroom, he can see them, and they feel the fear embedded in them. The other person went to their office behind the back room, so they had to walk down the hallway. I said, like, why do you want that? He's like, I want them when they get punished to think about what they did till they get to my office and come up with some type of story behind it and come up with an excuse and show that they're actually thinking. And you're right, they're the exact same school, the exact same program, but they're totally different, right? Because
Yeah,
the way the
yeah,
administrator teaches is night and day.
yeah,
And if you can't think that way in every single project that comes to your table, it doesn't make a difference what the particular mantra for that project is. It's always going to be different because everybody thinks differently. Everybody lives
Yep.
differently. Everybody functions differently. Our job is to bring out that function, understand what you're trying to accomplish, and not just, I would say, try to bring it out, try to get information. Like when we do a house, I'll give you examples. I'll drive a person crazy about their life. I'm like, so when do you come home? Would you wake up before your wife or after? Do you wake up? Do you do exercise and take a shower in the morning? Like, what do you want from me? I was like, I need to know
sure.
everything about your life because I'm not designing a house for myself. I'm designing
Yep.
a home for you to physically live in, and that life is generated by your physical surroundings. And the more I understand it, the better I can get your surroundings to work for the way you live.
Yeah. Well, I think that gets back to what we were talking about initially, is that it seems as if you're able to scale your business so enormously because you've really kind of taken your ego out of it.
Nothing to do with it.
Sorry?
So I have nothing to do with it. I'm just, I wake up in the morning and I just do my best. I go back to sleep and do the same next day.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, it absolutely seems as if, you know, all of your projects are very responsive and really kind of driven by, deep listening and deep sensitivity to, your clients. So it seems as, so, I mean, obviously you're working in so many different states and you have all different kinds of regulatory environments that you're working under. Do you feel as if regulation ever helps your creativity or where does it really stifle your creativity?
That's a great question. So I was talking to someone this morning and we were discussing doing work in the 5 towns in New York area, which is a little bit outside New York, and their rules are a little bit more lax, like almost like New Jersey area, which has laxer rules. And then we were discussing the difference between New York City and the outskirts of New York City, which are basically have less rules. And I said, to me, New York City is easy to work with, even though everybody's like, wow, New York City is extremely heavily regulated. So one of the issues that I have outside of it is that if I have no rules, then there are no circumstances that we can say, okay, here we're going to go, and this is how I have to fit the mold or not fit the mold. There's a limitation. If there is no limitations, then you could do anything. If you could do anything, then you could do nothing in the same time. So when I'm in New York, I say, okay, I know what I need to get to. Okay, now how can I work within that framework to get it done? And usually projects we do in New York, we've gotten projects approved and designed in New York. We're talking about 18-story buildings in under 6 months, right?
Mm-hmm.
And approved 3 months later. Why? Because if you follow the set of rules, they'll give it to you, right? You go to New Jersey and you're like, okay, what are my rules? I don't know, make it up. I'm like, I can make up whatever I want. Are you going to give it to me? Well, what you made up we don't like. So what do you want me to make up? Make up a new thing. I don't like that one either. So you want to give me some rules you want me to make up? Make it up. You can't tell me that and then tell me you don't like it at the same time. So that's what really kind of creates this dynamic where there's got to be some set of rules to follow, because if there is no set of rules, then there's just matter of opinion. And my matter of opinion, the county's matter of opinion could be very, very different. And you can end up in a situation where it's, well, I don't like it, you don't like it, I don't like it, you don't like it, therefore we're not getting anything done.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always fascinated by this because obviously architecture is a massively collaborative art form and practice. And there are always so many stakeholders involved and everybody's got an opinion and there's so much subjectivity. How to get around that and then also I can only imagine you probably have a lot of clients who change their mind a lot of the time, or they don't really know how to articulate themselves very well. They don't actually even know what they want. And it's really your job to figure out, not just what they want, but what they need. And a lot of times people will tell you something, but they don't really actually, they don't necessarily have the tools to dive deep enough to really understand what they want.
What you said before, the deep listening concept, I think is extremely crucial. We were designing a building in New Jersey, and my partner ran the project a certain way, and the client came into the meeting, and I was in the meeting, and the client starts changing some weird stuff. I'm looking at the building, and he's like, starts sitting down with the staff to change it. I'm like, he doesn't like the building. So he's like, what do you mean? He just wants these things changed. I said, I promise you right now, whatever you do to change it, he will never be happy.
Right.
He looks at me and goes, how can you tell that? Because I said, his comments don't mean enough to be a situation where it bothers him, other than the fact that he doesn't like everything that's around it.
Yeah.
And I said, we have to sit down and scratch the whole building and start from scratch. He goes, you sure? I said, yeah, let's sit down and scratch it. We came up, we sat down, we homed in, we redesigned the entire building from scratch one time. He's like, oh, I love it. We're done. I'm good. So he goes, how'd you know? I said, you have to really listen to their questions and what they're saying, because most of the time people tell you things, their interpretation of what they're telling you is not necessarily architectural related, but if you can't figure out how to interpret that into what it needs to be for architecture, then you're never going to get to the same point where they are, because you're right, most people don't know how to interpret their requests into an architectural question. And our job as architects is to take their questions that are not architectural and figure out a way to convert that to an architectural conversation where we get them their life basis that they're trying to accomplish within the project, but make it architectural. And that's really where the dynamic's very important. I think you call deep listening is a great way to use it, is that we really pay attention to our clients' conversations, and not always is it related to architecture. The more we ask them about things that are not architecture related, get us to a point where we can actually provide them the proper architecture to make it work.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, those are the kind of instincts that, you know, you either have them or you don't. But I mean, in some cases, it may take years and years to really be able to read people that way. But I would imagine, you know, what you did probably saved you guys, you know, 3 to 6 months of rework, just being able to, you know, read the room and read these different types of individuals and how they communicate, how they don't communicate. So
I say, wait, go ahead. I say a lot of times the biggest part of architecture is not necessarily design, but it's more about listening to people. The biggest part of architecture is listening to people. And because people tell you things without telling you them, and you really need to sit in a room. I tell this to a lot of young architects that come, they say, what do I need to do? How do I grow the company? I said, best thing you need to do is walk into a room and listen to everybody. Just don't say a word and just soak it in. And the more you do that, the more you'll realize that whatever you thought the first time you walked into the room, promise you is not the final thing you think of. The more you realize that people have silent conversations with you without talking to you. They have shrugs, they have arm responses. People cross their arms when they're in rooms. They have responses to what you're saying. They may not say it, but you need to learn how to understand what people are doing. And the unspoken cues really give you much more information than what they actually tell you most of the time.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I mean, that's why I really like to talk to people face to face instead of just having email exchanges, because it's very hard. It's hard to read. It's hard to read between the lines in text and emails. So you've scaled your company enormously. I mean, just to give our audience a sense of the type of scale you're working at, Jeff. How many active projects are you guys working on at the moment?
Somewhere between 300 and 500 projects.
That are active. Wow. I can't even imagine how you do it. And so I would imagine you have, you know, a pretty elaborate organization chart, and you have a lot of, you know, a huge amount of people that you delegate responsibilities to on these different projects. So like, what has been harder for you to scale? Has it been, you know, your design standards or your firm culture?
So my firm culture, I think we've, thank God, reached a point where most people that come, we try to call it a family, and we really mean that. I don't just sound to say like this, you know, big sign on the wall, we're a family. I really mean that, and we try very, very hard to keep people here long term, let them feel comfortable, let them grow within the company aspects. And the reason, and that goes to the same point that we're going to answer the second question, is that one of the hardest things to do in a design firm is keep the design conceptual concept of what design means and what it means to us, and to portray that to our clientele. That is very, very hard to do, because most people are not trained to think that way. And the
Yeah.
reason we like it as a family is because we want people to learn how we understand design and how we treat design and how we want to do it. We're always a big component of the mental aspect of design. Like I tell people, if you walk into a white room and there's a red couch, I promise any person in the world who's going to look at the couch, whether they like it or not, they have no choice. And the reason is that the contrast of white to red tells your brain to react to it. The same thing
Right.
works all over the place. When you walk into a room and it's too tall for the space, you will personally feel it. You may not know why it's the case. You will feel it. There's a psychological component to architecture that is so crucial that we want our staff to physically put themselves into a client's perspective and say, okay, what does the client want to feel when they walk into the space? What do they want the feeling to be? They want the feel to be cozy. Like I tell a client, what design do you want? They're like, what do you care what the finishes look like? I said, if you like eclectic design, I want you to walk into space and feel like it's eclectic. It's not so much about what's physically on the walls. The space has to feel a little smaller. It's got to feel a little bit more personable. It's got to feel like it's got pieces in your way. You want to feel that component. You want it more modern. You want to feel more open. And the architecture sells the feeling that these designs create, and that's really so important and to do that, we need to have people here long term to get ingrained into the thought process, to actually imbue it. So when they design, they only think of it once, not twice, not 15 times, because that's really where in a project you can lose money. The quickest place to lose money is in design. So you can design things 15, 20 times, you can really lose your pants.
Yep. So when you, okay, so obviously you're doing so many projects, you need to be able to just really delegate a huge amount of responsibility to, you know, people that are leading these projects. What are some things that are, I would say, I guess, non-negotiables for you? So if you give them a huge amount of freedom to sort of follow your principles and design a building that, you know, you want to put the RISE signature on, what are some of the, I mean, how do you give them like plenty of freedom to go ahead with, you know, what they've learned from you? But what are some of the non-negotiables that you really want to see that you feel as if, you know, needs to sort of temper that freedom in order to be a RISE project?
So one of the non-negotiables is that we do not want designs that are not buildable. And what I mean by that, we do see a lot where you have components embedded in design that are we see renderings online. They're not physically buildable. And the reason they're not buildable is because the people designing them don't understand the constructability necessary to build these elements. Great example, we designed a project in Florida. Here we designed and built these magnificent floating benches off the side of the wall. And I said, they're beautiful. They're never getting built. She's like, why? I do it in other places. I said, you're right. Each bench is going to cost me 10 grand to put it in. I said, I know my client is not spending 10 grand on a bench. It's not happening. And they're like, why? We love it. We spoke to them. We told them. I said, did you tell them it's going to cost them 10 grand to build the bench? They said, no, we just said we'll put a floating bench there. I said, you need to understand what it costs to build, because I need to know that I'm going to go detail it, and we're going to put steel in the wall to carry it, and it's not going to be there because no one wants to put the steel in the wall to carry the bench floating off the side of it. So consider that it won't actually fall down, right? Yeah. And guess what? Voila, they were all cut out of the project, of course. And therefore, and they all mad at us, like, you cut them out of the project. I said, I didn't cut them. You never told them what it would cost to install them. So you never actually gave the client all the information necessary to make a real decision. And that's really what it comes down to, the conversation that the non-negotiables, you cannot send the client a project that is not buildable. If you send the client is not buildable, that's unacceptable for us.
Of course.
And we see a lot of that within design, where people design houses with eaves and the windows are tucked to the bottom of the eave. I once saw a designer who did that. And I asked him, like, how did you and they send us the post picture and then the rendering, and obviously the windows are dropped 2 feet below the eave. And the rendering says tucked to the eave. The tucked to the eave is a very different look than below the eave. I said, how are you planning on building it below the eave? Because I know the designer. So he goes, what's the big deal? People do it all the time. I said, yeah, but then they do a drop truss, and therefore if you drop the truss, you can do it. You know what a drop truss is? I don't even know what a drop truss is. It's like, so you don't even know how to build it. So how would you tell the guy to build it? Because when you looked at the architectural drawings, you had a flush truss. If you have a flush truss, you're not getting a pocket eave. It's not possible.
Yeah.
So if you don't know what you're looking at, you can't even interpret it, that what you're building is actually going to happen.
Yeah. Well, you know, I've been talking to a whole number of professors at architecture schools, and I think that there's so much of an emphasis in these schools on teaching them how to become good designers and how to be, you know, the next Frank Gehry or whatever, where I've been in a number of crits myself where I feel as if nothing that they're presenting is actually buildable. And I do think that there's definitely a bias that comes out of these schools where they say, oh, well, this isn't a trade school. This is design. We're helping them figure out how to design. But then I think, you know, that when they get out of school, they may not even really know how to make something buildable. And that's kind of another layer of training that they probably need to get at a place like Rise.
Welcome to my world, I would say.
Yeah.
One of my biggest pet peeves on schools across the board is they teach them design and they really don't teach them real design, because the stuff that they're designing is basically worthless most of the time. It looks very pretty. They're basically an art school. You can go make paintings at that point. They're not building buildings that way.
Sure. Yeah.
So
no, you might as well hire somebody who studied sculpture or painting or
all of the day. Exactly. And that's one of my pet peeves, the huge pet peeve of mine, honestly.
Yeah. So, I mean, with your company, obviously, you know, you're a leader and you probably have to, you know, decide what kind of shifts and pivots your company needs to make moving forward into, you know, as technology advances, our society is changing so fast. So what are some of the shifts that you're testing right now in Rise that haven't really fully paid off yet, but they feel necessary to you?
So AI is something we've been playing with. AI is something that's going to change the industry a little bit. I don't know yet how it's going to pan out. I do think some of the AI companies are pushing further than they should be pushing. I think so. We use AI for renderings, for modification to renderings, and it has cut some of those timelines down a little bit. The question, I don't know yet how it's going to play out. AI is one of these things that we're playing with, and it will make a big difference. The VR conversation that we were having before is stuff that we play with in-house. Is it reached the point where it's so marketable? Not yet, but we do use it to a degree. These things are very, very, very early on in technology, and they're going to change very heavily. We're working on now a zoning analysis program that we do with a secondary company, where we can literally plug in a site and I'll throw out a zoning analysis for us within 24 minutes, something like that.
Wow.
Now, is it 100% accurate? We really see kinks in it. It's not perfect yet. We're working with the company to hammer out the kinks as they go along. But there's a lot of technology. Also, technology I've been looking at in the construction side of it. I've been looking at modular construction, 3D printing. These things are very, 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 very interesting to me. I know a lot of architects hate this because, like, oh, we're not architects. Like you said, they're designers more than architects. But the truth is, modular construction is a new wave and it's going to be the future. The only question is how it's going to physically fit into the systems that we're in now. And you really start to see you have manufactured homes, you have tiny homes. These things are major, major changes. You got prepackaged home flat packing and things of that sort. So I've been spending a lot of time.
Could you give me some specific examples of how you're using modular construction?
So I actually looked into, and I never actually used this, and this is part of the problem I always ran into, is I'm also do a little bit of development on the side. One of the developments I worked on was in New York, and we actually went to a modular company, priced it out. And one of the issues in New York City to get a modular building to work, logistics are very complicated, because you got to bring the boxes and you got to shut the street down. I got the crane in. By the time we were done, it just didn't work. It didn't make sense to really pull the trigger on such a complicated procedure to get something like that done. But I looked in Florida and I was looking at modular construction there to do work there. And there I had a different issue. The cost of doing as built on site was cheaper than modular. It didn't make sense for me to go to modular at that point. So I visited 4 or 5 factories at the time. There is going to be a point where that tipping ground makes sense, where it says, okay, modular works regardless because the boxes are cheaper. We looked into a company from bringing stuff in from China that were doing flat packing, where you pre-design the house and it comes in a little bit like a kit of parts. You put it together within less than 2 hours. You put an entire house together. So there's a lot of these technologies coming out. The question is how it's going to play out. I don't know yet, but I've done my homework on it and I'm ready to pull the trigger as soon as I see it. I am thinking that the real game would be is to get some type of 3D printing product that we are building components at 3D printers within a factory and shipping those components to site, so you can build your bathroom and 3D print it in a way, so to say.
Yeah.
I'm thinking that's really where I've been thinking component-based modular is a lot better profitability-wise than full-based modular in a way right now.
Okay.
So you componentize. It's like, for instance, you could do your bathrooms, your kitchens. Imagine you can modular your kitchen. You drop your entire kitchen into your house. You drop your entire bathroom into the house. It's already been pre-finished, pre-done, pre-tiled. Comes on a flatbed. Literally take a crane, put it into the project.
Yeah. Wow. I wish somebody could drop in a couple new bathrooms for me that way. That would be nice.
Exactly. Could you imagine that? Very possible. And that's happening as we speak. It's just the technology is not fully hammered out yet. We can 100% roll it out, I would say, but it's getting there. And these are the technologies I'm really paying attention to because they will change everything. Let's just say it that way. Now let's explain it.
So, okay. So Jeff, you obviously have your finger on, most of the new innovations and new procedures that are happening now. You're obviously very tech forward. So at this point, I mean, is there an early project that you did that you would have approached completely differently today if you started it, and why would you have done that?
That's an interesting question. Early project that we would have done that we would change differently. I have a project now that I'm working on that we're working on a very, very big project right now, actually. And I wouldn't say early on, it's something that we took on that we haven't done before, which is like kind of a city planning component. And what I'm realizing now is the way the municipalities look at things is very, very different than what we do as architects. And we have to think sometimes very differently than we want to think. And that, to me, is something I've learned very, very hard. So, for instance, the municipality looks at things in a way where it's much more broad conversation, and we're looking at things in much more precise conversation. And the truth is that the more broad you are in your conversation, the more precise you can be later on because you encompass a lot more components to it. So if you're going to make something like called a PUD, for instance, and you decide to precisify the PUD to something very specific, you're going to limit yourself to only that specificity. But if you created a circumstance which is much more broad, you can specify later because it's encompassing much more. And that vision is the way municipalities look at things generally. So for instance, like we're talking to a gas company and they're like, okay, we're looking at the next 150 years. You're like, I can't even think that long, They're like, well, we're running numbers, today's expense within the 50-year window, the 100-year window, and the 150-year window, because we really don't need to make our money back tomorrow. And we're looking at things, no, but I need to figure out how to make this deal work today. Like, we're not a today person. It's not a conversation. And to see things in those different sizes at the same time is very difficult to do because you got to look both, literally at the same moment and say, okay, I want to do specific A, and I need to be as general as A at the same time. So I need to focus on general, give them the preciseness to it from my side so I can accomplish both at the same time. Very difficult to do. And that's one of the things I learned. Not early on, but I learned some relatively recently how to focus that way, which is not easy.
Well, it reinforces a lot of the other things you've been saying, Jeff, about really kind of taking your ego out of it, having lots of empathy for your customers and stakeholders, and being able to project yourself into their mind and the way they see the world. I would imagine it saves you and your firm an enormous amount of time just having those insights. So final question. How would you want Rise to be remembered? Not just for what it built, but for how it built it.
I would like to be remembered. This is going to sound very corny, so I apologize beforehand. It's going to sound almost like I'm standing on one of those things in America, Miss America, I want the world to be great, But in a way, that's really what we're trying. We're actually building right now a particular project in Florida, and the goal of that project is really to bring low-income housing to a massive amount of people. And the reason why we're focused on it is purely for the ideological aspects of the project. And I know it sounds crazy, but I would love to be remembered as someone who's helped change the world for the better. And however that may come to be, that is very, very important to me.
Yeah.
And it's not about architecture. It's not about anything else. The medium we're doing it is through architecture. But in essence, what we're trying to do is really make the world a better place. And that could be through how we approach the architecture or how we approach the way people use the spaces. But our goal is to make a difference.
Well, it seems like you're doing that. I mean, it's really inspiring to see how fast you've grown, and the strategies you've used to do that. Any other final words of wisdom you have for our audience, Jeff?
Final words of wisdom I would say is that if you listen to this and you're planning to go to architecture, understand the architectural world, try your best to do what we do for our clientele, to understand where we're coming from. And our goal always is, as architects, is to make your life better and make your aspects better. So if you don't understand, ask. We will gladly be involved in the conversation to help grow together, because that's ultimately what we want to do, is grow and make the world a better place together. And if we can figure out a way to get to a point which is someplace in the middle that makes everything better, that's always the goal in life.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your time, Jeff. It's been amazing learning some of the ways that you've been navigating all this. So once again, our guest is Jeff Akerman. He's the founding principal of Rise Architecture, and you can check them out at risearchitecture.com. Thanks so much, Jeff. Really look forward to catching up with you and continuing the conversation at some point. I'd love to meet up with you in the city sometime. Thanks everyone for joining us today, and we'll catch you on the next episode. Thanks, Jeff.
Cheers. Take care.